everybody wants to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
Do you want to do extensions on your graffiti and you don't know exactly where to start? Whenever you try, you feel lost or you feel the need to copy somebody else's? Well, in today's video, I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know about how to do extensions and how they work. We're going to be teaching you the formula about how this stuff functions. That way you won't feel lost when doing your own extensions and you won't feel the need to copy other people's. That also means that if you're not exactly a fan of the ones that I'm drawing, that's perfectly fine. We're only teaching the formula here. So what I'm teaching you can be applied to any extension that you would want to draw. So let's not waste any time. Let's hop right into the black book here and check out what we have on the page. So starting right here, we have our letter S, and this is really where we want to start things off. We need a strong foundation before we can start adding any stylistic changes to it. And that's exactly what an extension is. An extension is a stylistic flourish, if you will. An extension is any additional piece that you add on to the letter structure that is not naturally part of the structure itself. So for that reason, we really want to start off with a sound foundation. We really want to make sure that our actual base structure here, like our S, is fundamentally correct before we start stacking things on top of it. Because if our base structure is kind of sloppy or it's not really working out, then anything we add on top of that, like our extensions, is going to kind of fall apart and it's going to be susceptible to the same errors that are showing up in our base structure, which you can see a couple of examples here on the screen now. So if you're just starting graffiti and you feel like you need help on this part, be sure to check out the playlist above. It'll teach you everything you need to know about building a proper letter. So with that out the way, what do we have right here in the center? This is our extensions, and they come in two different categories. You have compressed extensions, which are smaller and more condensed extensions that don't really travel all too far from the letter itself. And we could see an example of compressed extension at the top here. And our bottom two examples right here are going to be our more typical extensions. And these are the ones that actually extend and they can travel a lot of distance. They don't have to travel a long distance, but they certainly can. Now the reason for this is because of the anatomy of an extension. Like anything in art, it's got anatomy applied to it. There's a science, there's a method behind the madness here, and we can easily demonstrate that with the red, yellow, and blue markings on these extensions. So it doesn't matter what kind of extension we're using, we can break that up into three different pieces. You have our origin marked in red, and this is essentially where the extension is going to branch out of the letter from. And then we have our travel distance marked in yellow, and that's exactly what it sounds like. This is the part of the extension that actually extends and moves. And then we have the destination marked in blue, and this is the area where we conclude what our extension is doing. Now this anatomy actually defines the difference between your compressed extension and your normal extension, because compressed extensions, their primary part of their anatomy is their origin and destination. They don't have much of a travel distance. So the red and the blue area are going to be larger than the actual yellow area. And it's for this reason that the compressed extension doesn't really move all too far from the actual structure itself. And the opposite is true for our more normal extensions, as you'll see on the two bottom examples here, where the yellow area is the more dominant part of the anatomy. And this is exactly what allows the extension to extend. Now here's the kicker. Extensions, no matter the kind you're using, they're all just a detail. And details in every single art form are useless by nature. As a result of that, we have to give our detail, our extension, a fundamental reason to exist. Otherwise, it's not doing anything for our piece. So each one of these colored sections can perform a different fundamental job. So we want to flow out of the origin, we want to have a reason for our travel distance, and that reason should be something fundamental, like filling in negative space, adding in weight, something of that nature. Now the larger our travel distance is for our letter, the more of a fundamental reason it needs to exist. And we want to flow at the destination. Now you don't need all three of these reasons. If you have all three, great, you're certainly going to have an easier time making that extension work. But if you just have two or you just have one, it's harder to make work, but you still can make it work. And this is where you get to really allow your creativity to shine, because some graffiti artists, they really like to use extensions to add weight. Others, they don't really use extensions that way. They like to use extensions to add flow. Some like to use it to fill in negative space, like myself. I love using extensions to fill negative space. So how you use extensions is up to you, and how you design your extensions will be based on what you need them to do as well. There's a lot you can do here, and it's really up to you. And this is actually something that we teach in our book, which you can find a link in the description down below. We have ebooks on our store and physical copies over on Amazon, and hopefully soon the book will be in Barnes & Nobles. But here in this section of the book, we teach you not only the formula of extensions, but its anatomy and how to use it. And we use hand styles as an example, but all this information is applicable to throwies and pieces as well. Now there's one more thing here we got to discuss about how extensions work in relation to letters that you guys might have already spotted. We have a third drawing here, and we haven't spoken about it yet. And that's because it has serifs. Where do serifs fall as far as extensions are concerned? Because as you can see, this right here is very much just an ordinary print font S. Yet, this is a serif. However, this is not a print font S, yet that is a serif. So how exactly does that work? What's the differentiation between those two? As it turns out, serifs are also extensions, and serifs can be broken up into two categories. You have structure-based serifs and extension-based serifs. Right here with this line, our basic structure S travels through the actual serif itself. The serif is just an additional stroke to a letter. So we do an additional stroke in the downward direction in order to arrive at this little square piece. And by doing that, we arrive at a variant structure S. If you need a tutorial on variant structures, we got one right up here. And we also teach it in the book. That's what makes this part right here a structure-based serif. And you'll notice we also have an origin, albeit very thin, a travel distance, which is even more thin, and a destination, making that serif a compressed extension. And the same thing is true over here. When we go ahead and we consider our basic structure S, it goes right through the serif in that area right there. But this time, this little piece doesn't make a variant structure. That little piece is just an additional stroke to the letter. And as a result, it's an extension-based serif because it doesn't make a variant structure. And you'll notice we once again still have our origin. You have your travel distance, and then you have your destination. Now we have two different S's here where we're demonstrating a lot of different extensions, and you can immediately tell which one of these two is considering how its anatomy functions and what it's contributing to the letter overall. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind when we're discussing these right here is that you do not have to design your extensions in this way. You can do any extensions you want. We're only teaching the formula here. So over here we have an extension-based serif, and that works easy enough. There's nothing really crazy going on there. We kind of already discussed it in previous examples, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it there, and we're going to move on to this next one over here that swoops down the back of the S. And just like our extension-based serif over here, this is a compressed extension as well. You can see it travels along the body of the letter. It doesn't travel too far away from the letter itself. It doesn't go a long distance either. So you get to see how we flow out of the origin. The S travels in this direction and immediately transitions into the extension right out of its natural curvature. There's not much of a reason for the travel distance, but the travel distance does have line uniformity and similarity with this section and this section of the S right here. So the travel distance has a fundamental purpose. It's contributing something to the basics. And then the destination also has flow with this and this line here. That's a good example of all three fundamentals being used for all three parts of the anatomy. This tiny extension here, we'll say the origin is on this side, although you could be from the top of the bottom. It really wouldn't play a difference, with the destination being here and the travel distance there. We just want this to fill in space. It doesn't really flow much out of the origin or the destination, but it does go at an angle that is similar to some lines around it. For example, this line on this side here and this side being similar once again to this back piece and this front piece, as well as this tiny piece here. Little things like that make a big difference. They help things to flow a little bit more. So this is an example of using only one of those properties that an extension has to offer, and yet we still make it work. This next one really highlights why compressed extensions are so great to start off with if you're just getting into extensions, because they almost work by default. You really don't have to do anything to make a compressed extension work. In fact, you almost have to go out of your way to make it not work, and this will demonstrate why. So once again, we have our origin right here, which we do not flow out of. You have your travel distance, so then we come to our destination right there. Because compressed extensions don't really travel all that far from the body of the letter, they almost always flow at the destination because the destination is right next to the origin. So oftentimes what you'll get is line uniformity from here to the line that would have been right there, and the neighboring lines from, you know, here as well as here. Next up, we have a more typical extension, one that actually travels a large distance. And as you can immediately see, similar to the very first extension, we flow right out of the origin following the trajectory of the S. We have all of this travel distance, and then you have the destination right here. Now the reasoning for the travel distance wouldn't really be applicable to a single letter in this case. It would really need the context of a full piece in order to show its usefulness, but depending on the piece, this might be filling in negative space. This might be adding weight to the left-hand side of your piece. And this is a massive travel distance as far as I'm concerned, and that's why we keep it close to the letter. This shows us that your typical extensions can, in fact, be close to the letter and still be a typical extension. That'll be because it travels a large distance. But since we kept it close to the letter, that travel distance isn't as intrusive. Along the way, it still does share some similarity. It's not like it doesn't share any. So we do have some flow, some fundamental reason right here. We flow with line uniformity and similarity right here and right here. And then we flow once again with line uniformity and similarity right here and right back up here. So that's an example of how how you might use the fundamentals to the different parts of an extension and make it work with your letter itself. Now, over here on the right-hand side, we have another S where none of these extensions really make much sense. None of them are really working together for the letter's benefit. You see, we come out the top here, and sure, we flow out of the origin, and we even flow at the destination a little bit. But what is the reason for this travel distance? What is it doing? Unlike this one, where this one didn't really add much of any negative space at all whatsoever to the image, this one adds plenty of negative space right in here, and that distorts other fundamentals. It also shoots off into this direction before coming back to the piece, so whatever happens from here to the next letter is once again more negative space that it's adding. So far, this extension is costing us more than it's giving. It's hurting us more than it's benefiting. But what about this extension? It pops out the side of the S, similar to how this extension did and this extension did. So it's not flowing out of the origin or the destination. And what is the reasoning for that travel distance? It's not like it was over here where this served some kind of purpose and it stuck close to the body of the letter. And remember, the larger the travel distance, the more of a fundamental reason you need. Now this travel distance protrudes outwards away from the letter, and it doesn't really flow all that much. It might be filling negative space depending on what would come before it, sure, but you gotta ask yourself, do you have any better solutions for fixing that problem? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. It's something that you would certainly want to think about. So here we don't really flow out of the origin, kind of similar to some of the previous extensions, but we do flow at the destination, and that certainly helps. But the part that a lot of newer graffiti artists have trouble with is the travel distance. What is the reason for the travel distance? Why are you putting the extension there, and why is it designed like that? This surely could fill in negative space, but if it's not the last letter, if there's another letter after it, is this overlapping something that might be important? Is it covering crucial pieces of structure for the neighboring letter? Is the travel distance too contrived to get to that destination? We could just use what we have over here to do the same job that this is doing. And here we get a similar thing, right? We have another large extension at the bottom of the piece, but this time it doesn't really stay close to the body of the letter. We also aren't flowing out of the origin this time, as you'll see here, and we're certainly not flowing at the destination, at least not directly. We do have some line uniformity and similarity with the destination and this, and that certainly helps out, but then we have to ask ourselves, what is the reason for the travel distance? Why does the extension travel so far down and so far out? It's building all of this negative space here, it's adding a lot of weight, and most of this area doesn't flow at all. These are the sorts of questions you want to ask about your extensions. You want to look at the origin, the travel distance, and the destination and ask myself, am I flowing out of the origin? Yes? Great, perfectly fine. That's a good start. No? Alright, then I'm going to need a reason for the travel distance or flowing at the destination. Next question, do I have a reason for the travel distance? Yeah, sure, it's to fill negative space, or it's to add weight, whatever the case might be. Is it doing that job effectively, and is traveling in this way, is designing the extension in this way going to make sense once we get to the destination? Yes? Well then, perfectly fine. Go through with the extension. No, for literally all of these? Then maybe we rethink our travel distance. Lastly, you ask yourself, do I flow at the destination? No? Do I have the other two qualities? If so, great. Make the extension work. If not, then I need to rethink the extension. Alright, that pretty much sets you guys up for extensions. You should at this point at least be familiar with the different parts of an extension and its anatomy, and as long as you keep those things in mind, from there, all you need is practice. Let me know what you want to learn next about graffiti, leave it in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this tutorial, check out our book in the description down below. We have ebooks on the online store with physical copies over on Amazon. Want more amazing graffiti tutorials? Check them out right up here with more graffiti content right down here, and I'll catch you guys back here next week. Thanks for watching.